Mm-hmm.
Happy New Year, everyone. Thank you for your patience.
Mm-hmm.
I'm excited to meet today. I know we had some big ideas when we last met in March. And, certainly I wanted to follow up on them and certainly talk about a few things that have transpired between last time we physically met. So, one, today is the first day of... Oh, good. Hi. You did it. You did it. Thank you. Today's the first day of Black History Month. We celebrated Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. a couple of weeks ago. We have a bright outlook on 2024, and yet there's still a lot of things that are troubling in our community and certainly across the globe. So one thing that stood out to me in the last few days is that the FBI released its report of hate crimes between 2018 and 2022. This was about focusing on hate crimes that students are reporting themselves. So about 30% of hate crimes that students experience are happening in school. And so really the predominant age is elementary school. And so certainly Black students and African American students have the highest reported hate crimes against them, and then anti-Semitism, and then anti-LGBTQ. So just thinking about some of the things that I had talked about last time was exploring different partnerships that we could have with other committees. And so certainly there's no shortage of hate, unfortunately. There's a spike in anti-Asian hate crimes. There's certainly been a spike in anti-Muslim and anti-Arab sentiment. And so there's a lot for us to do, and so one of the things we had discussed was partnering with other committees so that we could feel as though we're having some kind of contribution and what that could look like. So in looking at Community Board 8, some of our demographics are about 20% of the residents in Community Board 8 are students or under the age of 18. And so there's a significant number of young people, and certainly we're a very diverse district, we're a very diverse borough. And so what are the ways in which we can start to think about how an individual can cope with discrimination or how they might be struggling in these times? And a lot of the things we've talked about oftentimes are bringing communities together to talk about sort of a long history of conflict or discrimination or, sort of what's going on. And it just sort of struck me that with young people, it's hard to sort of like find your way and find who you are as an individual while you're going through all these things. And it compounds mental health challenges. I don't think that's a secret to anyone. But it also impacts physical well-being as well. So heart disease, diabetes, all the stress, everyone talks about stress and how that impacts your physiological health. And so what could we really do about it? So I'm also part of HHS, the Health, Hospitals, and Social Service
Human
Services, thank you. I can never keep it straight. So we started talking about hate on health and what that could look like. And with the FBI report that just came out focusing on young people, I also reached out to Dr. Gomez to see if potentially we could collaborate with the youth committee on talking about active ways that people can help combat how they might be feeling in this moment. Just thinking about sort of like the health of our community. how are we doing as a people, and what can we be doing for each other, and sometimes more importantly, what can we be doing for ourselves. And so that's sort of where I wanted to open up the chair's report and open up a discussion about ways that we could work together, and what would we want to get out of this? What is our intention? What's the audience that we'd like to have? What would the community gain from a conversation like this? And do you think it's valuable? Do you think we should go down another path? Do you think we should change our tactics entirely?
I think what you're saying, Margaret, is exactly right. At the moment, I'm forgetting who's chairing Health Hospitals and Social Services. Yes, Rabbi Bob Kaplan. I think this is a great opportunity to work with them, to talk about exactly the issues you're talking about. I hadn't really thought, we're all aware of hate crimes and that sort of thing. I hadn't really thought of it so much in terms of age demographics and students and how they're affected. I know there is some of that, but from what you're saying, it's a bigger problem than I realized it was. But I think having some sort of communication with them, and ideally maybe even a joint committee meeting down the road, would be a great idea. So we can put together what we know, what they know, and this is an issue that really has to be brought to the attention of the community. And I'm sure parents of children who are experiencing this sort of hate crime for whatever reason, they know they've got a problem, and I'm sure they would appreciate hearing that we're trying to address it in some way. So I think that's a great idea. Yeah.
It does that. I don't know why it does that. It's a second, yes, it does. I agree with Bob. I think there's nothing to lose and everything to gain from it. And also, I was going to ask if you could send us the link to the report. That would be helpful, at least for me.
Yeah.
To read. And I also think that it aligns with, what they're attempting to do in DC, which is to, I think social media does have a lot to do with it, and the exposure to electronics way too soon, I think, could be a contributing factor to that on a number of levels, hate crimes, and to the rise in obesity and things of that nature with the youth.
And there's a gentleman who used to attend our meetings. I think it was our meetings. But one of the things he said early on, or maybe it was HHS, but he also, majority of individuals committing hate crimes are white males over 18. I'll share that through the FBI data. But he was commenting that there are people who also, with social media, you click on one thing that's not necessarily like hate, but it leads there because that's the feed. That's what you just keep getting, and it becomes more and more aggressive. The more things you isolate on, or the more things you click on, it takes you to more varying levels of extremism and all those kinds of things. So, and people are isolated, and so how do we, not everyone can be addressed, but I think there are a few things, especially as it relates to young people. How can we, as a community, sort of rally around young people, and especially those who might be receiving bullying, violence, sexual violence. All of these things are sort of bundled under hate crimes. There are additional criteria, certainly, but those are some of the things that, it's sort of like addressing the whole world in a community board meeting, but, yeah.
I think that also that we have to differentiate because not all hate gets classified as a crime, right? So there's there's a lot of hate. Only few of them just go under the classification of hate crime. I think that was also part of the report from the 5 president. When we asked, I believe it was the last meeting, how many incidents were hate crimes. There's a lot of hate, but not everything is go under. It's important that we also address, I think, I'm also part of HHS committee, and we discuss hate a lot in that we cannot ignore self-hate, right, which leads to suicidal thoughts and incidents. A lot of self-hate, especially after the mental health crisis from the pandemic. That is also something that we should address. Do we get data on suicides in our community board?
I don't know. I was looking at the community board profile, but I mean, it is the leading cause of when people take
gun violence, right? The leading cause of death by gun violence is suicide. I mean, I never seen a report on how many suicides that happens in our community. I don't know if there is a data that is available with 5 or not.
No, you're right, Sebastian. We see a lot of breakdowns of crime, as you know. I mean, we all get that information. And we have murders and rapes and grand larceny and all that. I've never seen suicide broken out as a separate category.
I understand it's not a crime, but it's still an issue that needs to be addressed.
Right.
There's a lot of self-hate contributing to.
Right. But if somebody does kill themselves, there's almost always involvement from law enforcement in one way or the other, or the medical examiner's office. So there is documentation of that sort of thing when it happens. But that's a good point. And Margaret, I was going to say, have you reached out to Rabbi Kaplan about doing maybe some joint committee or something that where we and they might get together in some way?
Yeah, and to Sebastian's point, we did talk about this on the committee, but I think we were still like at this part of the funnel. Like it was still too broad, and we didn't know how to whittle it down. And I think, rightly so, some people may say this is too passive. We should be more outspoken about hate in the community. I mean, there's more symbols, and students on campus are feeling, at a greater exposure and reporting higher hate crimes. So we were still here, and we were talking about all sorts of different experts, but I think we were sort of left at a crossroads of like, what's too big? Who's our audience? I mean, I don't think we're in a position where we want to have sort of like this public health conversation of experts. We want the community to think about what actions they could take as individuals, what actions we could take together. And so how do we do that without being too big, and without it being sort of like academic exercise or one that is taking place in so many other spaces? Because there are so many people who are coming together and having these conversations, which are really important. I think we were stuck on that. Do you agree, Sebastian? Oh, hi, Julie. I'm sorry.
Hi. No,
Go
that's
ahead.
okay. I'm listening into the conversation, and while you guys were talking, I just jumped on the website to see if I can get any information. And I'll email this to you, Margaret, so you could share it. But with the Department of Health, they have like a nice breakdown, suicides by quarter in New York City. Their last study was from 2015 to 2020. And by the boroughs, we come in 4th. Who's the highest? They have Brooklyn, Manhattan, then Queens, then the Bronx, and Staten Island is last. On an average, we have about 74. But I'll send you the key points and everything, and you can get a lot more information. They have a lot of key points here, statistics.
I guess,
Margaret, given the prevalence of social media and the complaints, I mean, my kids are in between. My children are way too old for this stuff. My grandchildren are a little too young for it. But from everything I hear and read and hear from other people, this is a huge concern. I mean, we just saw what happened in Washington yesterday. The bullying and social media, I mean, God help us, children who've killed themselves because of social media abuse. This must exist in our community as well, to whatever degree. And they're probably, maybe the schools are a way to go on this, to contact the schools. Maybe we should be also talking to the Education Committee, Sylvia, about this. But I'm sure there are conversations going on in the community, and people who are aware of the extent of this problem, and we should try to find out more about that and reach out to them and make them part of this discussion.
Mm-hmm. What do you think should be the outcome? Like, what are we working towards? Do we want awareness? Do we want to have a perspective building opportunity where people can have empathy and try to come up with our own solutions of what we could do to help youth and others in the community?
I'm just thinking, if I hate somebody, right, for whatever reason, I'm gonna come out and tell someone that I hate this person. I might tell a friend of mine, but not.
Indirectly, well, because my experiences, they may not express it with words, but their behavior,
Yeah.
Dictates the hate also, right? Conveys the hate. So I think that's how it would manifest.
Because I think the problem is when the person acts on the hate, right? Not the hate itself is the issue. Actions that stem from the hate. Very tricky. Yeah, I know there's like education and a lot of resources will help to change person's perspective. But the hate remains, and it's some kind of hidden, right? And some people express it, and that's when it becomes an action, and sometimes becomes a crime. Very tricky subject, and addressing it and providing resources is challenging. Do not know what are the, if there are any evidence-based approach, action of hate. Because it's hate itself, you cannot really stick on hate. So I'm not going to say.
People are not going to report it.
Yeah. People are not going to say if you hate somebody or if you hate something, certain practice, whatever it is, people might not express it.
So do we want to focus on mitigating the expression of the hate, or do we want to get to the point of like helping people with identifying hate as a stressor or discrimination or perceived discrimination and sort of go that route? I see them as two. One is looking at the individual and how they're coping and surviving and getting what they need through these times. Another thing is more
From a victim perspective, I think if you are a victim of a hate crime or an action due to hate, how do you report it? How do you, when you are the victim, what resources are available for you? Get help, right? So, and provide help to the victim of hate. Stopping the hate itself is like, people will not admit they hate. Very sensitive topic, right? Victims should have resources to reach out if they they experience something that is related to hate. Sometimes when they approach and when they try to reach the resources and they just got turned away, you know, whom they're gonna call what, 311, they're gonna call 911, whom they're gonna call if you I walk out on the street and somebody start attacking me for whatever reason, verbally, or I'm a victim of hate, whom do I call? If I call 911, is that gonna be something that the cops take, or is it something, there is no assault involved, right? And I'm getting abused verbally on a daily basis. Where do I go?
Mhm.
That's a good point, Sebastian. We don't want to do this if there isn't some solution to the problem. You know, there's no point in identifying the situation if, you know, once we've identified it, then we have nothing further to do, nothing further to offer. So that's a good point. But I think, Margaret, what we do here has to be, the goal here has to be both realistic and achievable. You know, if this is a problem in the community, and I'm sure it is because it's a community, it's a problem nationwide, we want to figure out where is the greatest problem. And if it's among young people, which is what it seems to be, and they're the most vulnerable population, that's something we really need to focus on. And we also need to know what are the solutions, what are the options, as Sebastian said, for young people. Is it school-based? Is it, you know, is it something else? Is it faith-based? Is it, you know, what resources are available? What can we do to communicate to people in the community who have this problem, whether it's parents or children, young people, whatever? You know, let's make them aware of resources that exist. But let's first understand, where do we need to focus? Where do we need to target our areas of concern and the areas in which we might be able to offer some assistance? I think the outreach here has to be somewhat broad in the beginning until we really get more information and know how to focus it more. So health hospitals and social services definitely, but I think also, you know, let's reach out to education and Sylvia's committee and, you know, have they addressed this problem? Are they aware of this problem? So this is a big issue to take on.
I feel,
An event of some type.
Oh, maybe.
Meet with those, because we should also involve youth as well.
Yeah, you're right.
You know,
You're right.
Once we meet with those three committees,
Yeah.
where do we go? Do we want to have like some type of fair or some, you know, analysts where we can actually have open and direct dialogue with individuals about that?
Yeah. It could be an evening, you know, with the cooperation of the elected officials where, you know, we address this sort of thing. I mean, particularly if we find out, for instance, that it's, as I would suspect, a bigger problem in middle school and high school than elementary school, you know, maybe we do something at 141 or something like that. And, you know, and have, exactly as Kelly is saying, some evening devoted to this subject.
Well, according to this thing, I mean, granted, it's not our district, it's nationwide, but they did say actually that it is elementary school,
Wow.
which is also alarming. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, so I think, those are all good points, and I'm sure there has to be something, about where to go to help and resources and things like that, but if we could put together and then give like immediate resources in our immediate community, that might be, easy thing to do in addition to a conversation, and maybe, you know, maybe, Julia said she was gonna put this on her agenda, and maybe the youth will wanna lead something themselves.
We be there to support them.
Sure.
Right, we should hope to support them, yeah.
Yeah.
That's a heavy one.
Yeah.
This is a really big issue, a very important issue, yeah.
And, you know, young people's hope for the future is like in a good place, so what can we do? Okay, great.
Too, looking at it from, because a lot of it, I think, stems from, again, social media and seeing images of what society perceives is the right thing, right? And a lot of the things that are, and we all know this because we're adults, but children don't have the same, you know, mindset. They don't even want to step away from their phones, right? They think the world ends if you take their phone away from them, but all really is changing the behavior of someone and saying, you know, you just have to let this go for a few hours a day, and then it improves your mindset.
For sure. I just forgot my point. Happening more and more.
Okay, it's called information overload, Margaret.
There you go.
That's being very generous.
It happens to all of us all the time.
You know, I mean, this is a really big subject, and we shouldn't go into it thinking, okay, at the end of this, we're going to solve the problem. You know, after 3 or 4 months, it's not going to be that easy. What we really have to do here, I think, is understand the problem, highlight the problem, bring greater awareness to it, and then work on solutions where we can find them, and, you know, to the extent that we can find them. But this problem's going to be with us for a while.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Okay.
I don't know if the DOE actually reported as hate or it just gets reported as bullying. Right? I think it is, if it's classified as bullying, and they might have standard protocols for kinds of bullying when it gets reported. Not know if they classify it as hate.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, the two are connected, but they're not identical, and,
So
right,
bullying is an action
right.
stemming from hate, right? So, but I don't know if the hate is addressed or bullying is addressed. Most likely bullying is getting addressed.
Certainly there's Venn diagram, but in terms of Sebastian's point about self-hate and suicides, what do you think we might do? Because it's certainly connected but also different. Any thoughts on what we might?
There are causes of suicide, right? People might know why this person killed himself or herself. And there are things that people say caused it. And I think that those are the things that we should address, whether it is poverty or whether it is mental health issues or, you know, contributed to it.
Solution, though, that needs to be addressed. A lot of people don't know how to deal with conflict, and I always say to people, you know, unfortunately, I know I've been impacted, and you say to people, suicide is a permanent solution to a very temporary problem, you know, and once you put it to them that way, it's sort of differently, but we also do have a duty, I think, as a society, you know, and as a board to, part of it starts with us, right? Because I know that, you know, in past years, right, we have been less than kind to each other, and people hear that, and you don't know what's a trigger for someone. Someone could receive negative comment, right? Can hear a negative comment, and that could be the trigger that puts them overboard. So it's really up to us to start having, you know, better conversations with each other and, you know, being nice, because that's where we can all agree to disagree. No one is ever going to be accord with you 100% of the time, but we can all express our opinions, but we have to do so in a decent manner and make sure that we're not offending anyone.
No, and it's a really hard issue, because sometimes you can be in communication with somebody and say something that you don't think is hurtful, and it turns out because the other person is in a certain state of mind, depressed, upset, whatever, it really is damaging in a way you couldn't even have imagined. It's a very complicated issue. And I think when we do what we're talking about here, we have to be realistic, and, awareness is the biggest contribution we can make. And we may also be able to make some contribution towards addressing this situation, but these problems are going to be with us forever. I mean, we're never going to say, well, we solved the suicide problem, we solved the bullying problem. That's not going to happen. Whatever we can do to ameliorate the situation, that's a positive thing.
A lot of resources available for suicide. I believe there's a hotline and access to those things.
Can we post those?
Why not?
They're public, it's public
Right.
information. One of the easier things we can do right now.
No, and, if you look, every time there's a news story about suicide, it's followed by some information about if you have suicidal thoughts, you call this number, or, you check this website or something. So there's a greater awareness of it now, because it's a terrible problem. Especially in young people, it's heartbreaking.
I hear people all the time. Off the news, like I will listen to one full news cycle, so it's 30 minutes of local news, 30 minutes of national news, 30 minutes of international news, and then that's it. I don't listen to the news for the rest of the day. You listen to the news, particularly in the New York marketplace, it's very disturbing, and it could really push someone fragile, over the edge.
There's a saying in the news business, if it bleeds, it leads. So, unfortunately, if there's really grim news, and that's tonight's top story.
And, I think in the spirit of awareness, and also it starts with us, that sometimes your conversations, and we're a part of conversations where people are like trying to compete with how hard it is, and then how hard it is, and how hard it is, but it's harder, and and the data proves that when there's an increase in hate crimes for one group that is marginalized, there's always an increase in another group that's marginalized. They go hand in hand. And so how can we as a community sort of rally together and understand the interconnectedness, and that it's every generation, right? It's cyclical. Anyway, okay. So, yes, awareness starts with us. Youth-led resources, and we'll get going with some of our community partners, schools, nonprofits, officials.
I think one thing that's coming out of this conversation is just how extensive it is. It's relevant to this committee, hospitals and social services, education, youth, probably even aging.
Yes.
And, we're beginning to see this is something that cuts across the community in so many different ways, and involves so many different aspects of community life that, we're finding now 5 different committees that in which this conversation is relevant.
And meant to reach out to,
Oscar, thank you. Yeah, I was trying to remember who it was. Yeah.
So I'll reach out to him and Sylvia after
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
Okay.
And even economic development with everyone losing their businesses and jobs, that puts people into a depression. Sometimes they don't know what to do.
It does, it does.
really
I mean, the
touches
more we
every
talk about it,
committee,
yeah.
you know, that we have.
Mm-hmm.
Public
Even
safety.
Public safety.
Yeah.
You know,
Mhm.
traffic and transportation people, you know, with
Yeah.
all the changes, you know, that are going on, you know, they can't find a parking spot, there's too many cars on the road, there's an accident, and
Yeah.
everyone's fighting for, you know, jockeying for a position, it really does. Thing.
Mhm.
So a nice forum would benefit everybody.
Consider doing something, I'm gonna say the spring, because that's too soon, and we need to, you know, out to all the committees, but perhaps in, let's say, sometime in September or early October, when the weather is still favorable, we can have some type of event, perhaps outside at one of the schools before things really get jammed up.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the
Or
place
maybe
to start this conversation, I think, is at the executive committee, given, you know, how many different committees we're identifying here that, that this issue relates to, so we start the conversation,
Okay.
yeah.
And maybe there's, sort of some larger community tabling kind of thing that we could be a part of.
Mhm.
Are going to be together anyway, that we could be a part of it.
Well, the Bronx DA's office has a hate crime, and I believe they table events as well.
Mhm. You know, I mean, right above us, we have, Mosaic Mental Health,
Mm-hmm.
we really don't have much interaction with.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, maybe Health Hospitals and Social Services does, I don't know, I'm not on that committee. But, you know, that's another possible resource for us to investigate, and it's right here.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you sure has opened up some subjects here, Margaret.
So, and I wanted to follow, well, and also veterans, so I wanted to mention
Yeah,
that,
yeah. Oh, suicide among veterans is horrible, yeah. Yeah, it's a huge problem.
so, I did meet the New York State Commissioner, for the, Veterans Department. And, so she is going to come to the Veterans Committee meeting on, I believe it's April 25th. And I asked her, or one of her colleagues, or if she's not able to be there, then, I think her deputy commissioner is going to come. But to specifically talk about, you know, benefits that veterans are not receiving. Certainly, you know, we have a long history of withholding benefits for, Black and brown veterans. And, also, we could talk about, suicide awareness in the community. We hadn't addressed that, but certainly we could, talk more about that and see, other resources that the city, homelessness,
Yeah,
for sure.
yeah, mhm, yeah.
Yeah.
There is also, just so you know, I mean, if you've reached out to this person, that's fine, that's wonderful. There is also, the city now has a
Mhm.
veterans, I'm not sure what the proper, title is, but the city has somebody who, heads a veterans committee or council or whatever it's called.
Yes, we met her. I think she's also like a.
No, I think it's a man, because I met
Oh.
him last fall at the Memorial Grove Veterans Day ceremony in
Oh.
November. Yeah,
Well, then I don't know, because,
this is the city again, not the city.
yeah,
Yeah.
we met, I thought it was the assistant mayor. My brain is not functioning,
Sergio will know who it is.
okay, I'll look it up,
Mhm.
or I'll ask Sergio.
Yeah.
I thought she was the senior most person, but I guess I'm mistaken. Um, So, that also covers all the things we said we wanted to work on this year, so I think we've sort of, we have a big, yeah, it's a lot. So, I will type up some of these things, and then if you all could sort of, add your points or action items more fully, that could help us sort of like be focused and not let this get too big and unwieldy. It is big and unwieldy right now, but
We just realized that it, you know, in this presentation, that it really touches, every committee is impacted by this. Every committee, so, I mean, we have to do what we have to do. This is necessary.
yeah.
Yes.
And maybe this is sort of, be too wonky, but this could be sort of an addendum to our, our annual report, and part of it makes me think like all of these different resources that we could be providing in the community could be captured so that we could guide people. I mean, not, the intention's not explicitly for that reason, that it could just go on a shelf, but like if we could capture something that it could be useful, sort of like a roadmap of if you've experienced this, or if you're experiencing, you know, suicide ideation, or, whatever it might be, that here's sort of your roadmap in the district of who you could go talk to, or get help, or just take a break, or whatever it might be. And that might help inform us on what else we need to, share or post to the website, or,
Honestly, Margaret, I think this is an ongoing project, you know, it's not like between now and June, we're going to pull everything together and have all the answers. I think, you know, we're going to provide as many answers as we can between now and June, and I'm sure there will still be more to be done after that. But, you know, we'll do what we can, we'll do as much as we can, but this is such a big problem that nobody can completely encompass it and say, okay, here's everything you need to know.
At least a minimum of 3 years before there's some real true impact. You know, honestly, if we're being honest, because we have to, you know, start the legwork, right? Put everything together, and then learn from the first event, improve upon it, and then keep moving, and by the time people are truly comfortable, really, with discussing it and receiving the information, right? It'll take a good 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, I mean, it's really an ongoing project.
It's an ongoing project.
Yeah, and, you know, we'll, the best we can do is provide information, and then provide more information, and just keep it going, and, and hopefully, something to mitigate the extent of this problem.
Were you gonna say something?
Oh, no, I was just gonna say that, I sent you quite a few different reports and stats from different agencies. They have like an Office for Prevention of Hate Crimes. I sent you their information, and it's quick reading, nice stats, and visually it's good, and they have a lot of resources also from the mental health, the district attorney, from the school, the New York City school systems. They also have a nice chart and information on the various grades and what they would give the children in regards to hate crimes. So when you get home, you'll see all the information that I sent you. It's
Thanks,
pretty good.
Julie.
They have a lot of resources out there.
Well, and thank you for that, Julie. And at least we don't have to start from scratch. And what you two made me think of is sort of the whole reason why we started SCREE in the first place was to talk about race and inequity and addressing things through every single committee of you know, everything from economic development to health to, and asking people to, chairs to put it on their agendas. Maybe this is something else that we say, like, maybe it's a reframing of what we've asked, and every single committee has taken on, inequity and, racial discrimination in some way, shape, or form. And so maybe using the power of each individual committee is to ask them to take on something that could address hate. And so, you know, if it's environment and sanitation, it's kind of like, well, what do we do? But in partnering with, I don't know, parks, but like, how does everyone take a piece of trying to elevate, or trying to squash hate, or trying to focus on hate as sort of like something where the community can come together, you know what I'm saying? So like using it as an intentional point, like we did with SCREE, and it took us, I guess this is 4 years now, it's coming up on 4 years in June, but like over 4 years now, every single committee, budget-wise, we focus on some element of inequity. And so perhaps we need to use this as the same sort of like, we need all hands on deck, we need everyone to take it on and to do their part in some way, shape, or form.
Right. So I understand, Margaret. I mean, in the same way we ask committees to look at equity as an issue, and, you know, to take parks for an example, are the parks evenly distributed throughout the community? And we know the answer to that is no, they're not. There are more in some parts of the community than others. So, you know, how do we address that sort of problem? Are there ways in which we can maybe create some parks, or at least some amenities, some playgrounds, whatever? You know, just ask each committee. We've been talking about this. I mean, I think everything we've said here tonight, none of this is controversial. You know, everybody knows we have a huge problem with hate, with social media, with suicide, et cetera. And just bring this up and say, we'd really like every committee to look at this, because as we started talking about it, we began to realize, well, it affects this committee and this committee and this, you know, and we're through half the committees on the community board. So we'd like everybody to think about this issue, and how does it affect your committee, and, you know, what could you be doing? Could you think about this? Could you put it on your agenda and talk about it and see, you know, is there some aspect of this issue that your committee could make a contribution toward?
Yeah.
Engagement, how many people we are able to engage if we do an event or an outreach would be kind of a measurable success or failure, right? Very difficult to find out how many people
Will ever have a
stop
failure.
hating. You know.
Yeah, that's a hard one, because a lot of it is learned in the home, right? It's not something that we can control, but I know that it will be a failure if we do nothing, and so we have to.
And we have to address the hate that does not result in an action, right? If we are able to address that, then the actionable items, I mean, hate crime will automatically decrease. Where do you report if there is no real action which leads to a crime? Who takes that report? Where does that data go? Do they report it? I don't know answers to it.
Yeah.
No, I'm sure the majority of these instances that occur never reach the level of crime, of criminality, and never are reported. So, you know, the reports, I'm sure, are a small fraction of these incidents that actually take place. The question then is, how do the parents or the people who are affected, how do they deal with this, short of going to the precinct for something that doesn't rise to the level of criminality? It's still a big issue. So, yeah, I mean, that's an important point. What resources can we give to parents in particular, and, you know, but others in the community, about what happens when you encounter these situations?
Yeah, and what we lose, you know, we lose as a community in suicides or in hate or discrimination. I think that's sort of an area where people have started to explore in terms of like economic mobility, like we all lose out, but what are the other ways which we as a community lose, by hate?
Mental health,
Mhm.
you know, I mean, mental health is a serious issue. What happens when, you know, I mean, children, we see these terrible stories. I mean, I just watched some of the news yesterday after the hearings in the Senate in Washington, and they have these parents on, and, you know, my 15-year-old daughter committed suicide, killed herself because of, you know, oh my God.
Bullying and all the stuff.
Bullying and social media and, right, you know.
And unfortunately, you know, children, we give them independence, right? They want to be independent, so if they encounter a problem, they want to try and resolve the issue themselves, and they don't go to adults for whatever reason, right? Because then they say if they go to the adult, then the adult will never trust them again. And it's not about trusting you again, it's that the adults have wisdom, you know, on their side to help you with this situation, so you don't have to, you know, put yourself in that situation.
Yeah. But the ramifications of something like that, obviously the parents are, you know, it's horrible for the parents, siblings if there are any, friends of whoever kills themselves, you know, the ripple effect just spreads out, and, you know, it soon becomes a community issue.
But this is not related to hate, but,
How is it not?
Because-
No, I'm just kidding.
because of the racial, you know, special committee for racial, did we ever address the opioid crisis in the community? And how is it racially, is certain parts of the community board that is more affected? Do we have a data on no crisis or anything that is happening?
Yeah, I think.
I know recently in the
Yeah.
Bronx, we had this issue where
Mm-hmm.
in the daycare and, you know, it's not in our community, but again, but
Mm-hmm.
was this ever, I mean, I'm new to this committee, I just joined it this year, last year.
We talked about it, I think, very briefly in, November. I know HHS, we talked about it, because we just wanted to get more information about Narcan into the community, and identifying symptoms of, and just giving people information about fentanyl. It's like from 5 years, it was maybe like 5% of drug overdose deaths to like now it's nearly 100%. It's connected in every single case.
And I
So-
found that there are strips that they provide to test if there is fentanyl in your drug. I don't think there is any place in our community board where a person can access it. I found out there's some place in Harlem, and there is some non-profit that is providing, I don't know if it's Grand Concourse or somewhere.
I think they have a list.
It should be the precinct. The precinct.
Is that Narcan or is it,
No, it's a test
the
strip.
test strips?
I know that Senator Rivera's office has a list of, organizations that they work with, so let me ask.
Yeah, and Senator Jackson too, I mean, I would reach out to the local elected officials.
I do not know if we can make it accessible through our office or something like that.
Yeah, good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think
Unlikely if these places are far, people are gonna go and pick it up from a place which is on a cab and go to pick up a strip.
Yeah.
They're selling it over, making it readily available at many farms.
yeah, I hope so, yeah.
Well, I found when I went to Massachusetts, so there's a ski resort, they have, it is, every ski resort have it, free, they have a dispenser.
Yeah.
I never seen it in New York,
Mm.
but I think they really aim at placing these things where people might use it.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Hotels, tourist areas.
Mhm.
I think it's worth asking HHSS if they've done anything about this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I know we just talked about it in terms of bringing more, like, Narcan trainings are so readily available, but I agree the test strips are, we all prefer that.
Narcan is like they have to carry it,
Yeah.
or at least they can test it before they do, the drugs. So.
Yeah, and with these Narcan kits, I mean, they're giving out, which I have one in my bag, but they are, I think they're including some test strips in the Narcan
Yeah,
bags.
okay.
But to your point, like, before we get there, like, let's just have them and readily available in the
Yeah.
community. Okay.
People know, where they can get it, or, there are health fairs done by elected
Mhm.
officials and.
Right. Anything else on your mind? Great. Well, we have quorum. I am not gonna forget that we have minutes to approve.
Oh,
Any, before we
yeah.
wrap things up? The November 2023 minutes, does anyone have any objections, edits, any comments, questions? Motion to approve the minutes? Any, objections, or abstentions? Great. I'll put this together in, I'll prefer like a Google Doc, or do you want your own, your own attachment? I'll send it to you, and you can contribute whatever else I've missed, or, I'll add all the resources that Julie sent, and we'll get started. Youth, I believe their next meeting is maybe February 8th. So I know they're going to bring this up, so I'll try to touch base with, Julia before then.
Mm-hmm. Well, the executive committee meeting is February 7th, yeah, so that's a good place to bring this conversation up, too.
Okay, good. What is the best way to do it?
Yes, because then you don't have to have multiple conversations.
Conversations, yeah, right. They still have to have 5 different conversations, but at least you can make everybody aware with one conversation.
Okay. Great. Well, thank you all.
Okay.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Vincent.
Margaret. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie.
Good night, everybody.
Good
Nice-
night.
Hi, Julie.
To adjourn.
So moved.
I know.
Good night.
Night.